Hello, it's me, Mike with HPDS. This video will be a reading and a study of Leviticus chapter 11. So I'd like to go ahead and start off by praying, and when I pray, I like to pray using the Lord's Prayer out of Matthew chapter 6. And it reads, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Alright, so this video will be Leviticus chapter 11. And a quick recap, if you remember, we've gone through about 2 sections of Leviticus. The first 7 chapters were chapters about the offerings and the sacrifices and how exactly they are to be performed, and different laws regarding those, how the priests were supposed to burn it, where they're supposed to burn it, what parts they were supposed to burn, for what purposes, and so forth. And then the second section, which were chapters 8, 9, and 10, that was about Aaron and his sons, how they were the priests, how they consecrated themselves. And in the last chapter, chapter 10, if you remember, that's when Nadab and Abihu, which were 2 of Aaron's sons, they died when they put unauthorized fire, strange fire. So they either, and I mostly mentioned they must have put in the wrong incense. They used the wrong incense compared to what was requested, what was the instructions that were given back in Exodus, something like chapter 30. But they may have just offered it when they weren't supposed to offer it. So I didn't really quite mention that in that last video, but whatever, that's a different study. So, but what I will go ahead and do is I will go ahead and show. There you go, Leviticus 11. This one starts a new section, sections from about chapters 11 to about 15, which are kind of about cleanliness, and that's what this chapter is about. It's about cleanliness. And what we're looking for, it's a chapter of 47 verses, and verses 1 through 8 we're going to read about clean and unclean meats, what kind of meats they can eat and what kind of meats they can't. And verses 9 through 12 we're going to talk about the water creatures, same thing, which ones are clean, which ones are unclean. Verses 13 through 20 we're going to read about the unclean fowl. And verses 21 through 23, we'll read about the flying, creeping things, which are like bugs and stuff. 24 through 28, how people become unclean. Verses 29 through 43, we're going to read more about creeping things, which are more kinds of like the bugs and insects. And then verses 44 through 47, we're going to read about how the people are to sanctify themselves. So people become unclean. They can eat clean creatures, and they're gonna stay away. They're supposed to stay away from these unclean creatures. And people themselves become unclean, and when they become unclean, we'll realize that that's when they have to perform the offering from Leviticus 5, the trespass offering. So when a person becomes unclean, they're supposed to do that sacrifice, the trespass offering. But this will be Leviticus 11, and as usual, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll just go ahead and read straight through. Oh, wrong one. I'll read straight through, and then I'll reread it line by line, with the help of the Holy Spirit, to see what the Holy Spirit, how it explains, how it comes out to be explained. Let me see, Leviticus 11. So I'll go ahead and read it now. And it reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed, and cheweth the cud, among the beasts that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the swine, though he divide the hoof, and be cloven-footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcass shall ye not touch, they are unclean to you. These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, and of all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. They shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you. And these are they which ye shall have an abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, and the ossifrash, and the osprey, and the vulture, and the kite after his kind. Every raven after his kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after his kind, and the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gear eagle, and the stork, the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination unto you. Yet these may ye eat of every flying creeping thing that goeth upon all four, which have legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth. Even these of them ye may eat, the locust after his kind, and the bald locust after his kind, and the beetle after his kind, and the grasshopper after his kind. But all other flying creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. And for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth the carcass of them shall be unclean until the even. And whosoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. The carcasses of every beast which divideth the hoof, and is not cloven-footed, nor cheweth the cud, are unclean unto you. Every one that toucheth them shall be unclean. And whatsoever goeth upon his paws among all manner of beasts that go on all 4, those are unclean unto you. Whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean until the even. And he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. They are unclean unto you. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth, the weasel, and the mouse, and the tortoise after his kind, and the ferret, and the chameleon, and the lizard, and the snail, and the mole. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whosoever doth touch them when they be dead shall be unclean until the even. And upon whatsoever any of them when they are dead doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood, or raiment, or skin, or sack. Whatsoever vessel it be wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the even, so it shall be cleansed. And every earthen vessel whereunto any of them falleth, whatsoever is in it, shall be unclean, and ye shall break it. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on which such water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven or ranges for pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which toucheth their carcass shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass shall fall upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it shall be clean. But if any water be put upon the seed, and any part of their carcass fall thereon, it shall be unclean unto you. And if any beast of which ye may eat die, he that toucheth the carcass thereof shall be unclean until the even. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. He also that beareth the carcass of it shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goeth upon all four, or whatsoever hath more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, them ye shall not eat, for they are an abomination. Ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and ye shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beasts, and of the fowl, and of every living creature that moveth in the waters, and of every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beasts that may be eaten and the beasts that may not be eaten. So that was Leviticus 11 in its entirety. Leviticus 11, and it's kind of a long chapter. It has a lot of it's got a lot of stuff in there about what you can and what you can't eat. There's a bunch of different creatures it kind of lists off, and it talks about if they touch their carcass, they're unclean. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll just reread it one more time, line by line. Before I do that, once again, I'll show this what to look for. We are looking for, like I said, the clean and unclean meats that they could eat, and then we're going to talk about the water creatures of the same, the unclean fowl, the flying, creeping things. Those are like the bugs, the insects that fly, obviously. And then, obviously, we read about how the people become unclean when they touch these things. And the creeping things, which are the bugs, the insects that have more legs than normal, those are unclean. And of course, the people are to sanctify themselves. So God is making a statement here saying that these people need to be clean and holy because He is holy. He is holy, and therefore they should be the same. They should be like Him because He's the God that took them out of Egypt to be their God. So, but let me go ahead and read this. Like I said, 1 through 8. Clean and unclean meats. This is a long chapter, so I kind of want to get through it. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. So remember, these are the ones they can eat. And it's whichever ones part the hoof and they chew the cud among all the beasts that shall ye eat. So parteth the hoof and is cloven footed, and cheweth the cud. And these kinds of creatures, it has to be both. They have to have the cloven foot, and they have to chew the cud. And the cloven foot is like kind of like what the cows have. Obviously, the cows have a cloven foot where it's kind of split in half. It's sort of it's kind of looks like it's two kind of cloven, it's parted. And then chewing the cud is when they eat the grass, when they're just what we call let's see, vegans, not vegans, but I forgot what they're called. There's carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores. These are like herbivores. They chew the cud. They chew the cud, and they got that split hoof. Those are the ones they can, and so it does start making the difference, and it starts saying you gotta have both. It can't be one or the other. So nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud. So these chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof. So the camel has more of like the paw, like the animal paw, like you could see the toes and everything. But it chews the cud, but it doesn't divide the hoof. So the camel is unclean. And the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof. The coney's kind of like a bigger mouse, like a badger of some sort. or kind of like a ferret of some sort. I think it talks about ferrets here, and the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean. So rabbits, the hare, they eat the grass, but they don't divide the hoof. They also have paws that you could see like their toes, kind of like dogs or cats or something like that. They don't have the cloven foot, which is that divided hoof. So those are unclean. And the swine, so this is pigs, though he divide the hoof and be cloven footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. And I feel like for some reason growing up myself, eating swine, eating pig is still kind of, some people consider that, like certain religions say, don't like to eat these because they still think they're unclean, for example. So people of the Jewish faith, people of the what's the other one, Muslims, a Muslim faith, these people, a lot of them don't eat pigs because of this kind of concept, that they feel like they're still unclean. And of course this was all being spoken to the children of Israel. Keep that in mind, that Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ came and made his sacrifice and left, in the book of Romans, we find out that we can eat any animal now. He says, don't call unclean what he has made clean. So these animals he's made clean in the future, but right now they're unclean to the people of Israel, and people still for some reason follow this kind of belief for whatever reason, because of their, in the Bible it says because they have weaker faith, but of course, I'll just leave it at that. So people still don't eat it, kind of because of this right here, this statement. They divide the hoof, but they don't chew the cud, and they need to do both, divide the hoof and chew the cud. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcasses shall ye not touch. They are unclean to you. So you're not supposed to eat them. You're not supposed to touch their carcass. They're unclean. So keep that in mind. Back in Leviticus 5, if somebody became unclean, they had to make that sacrifice. And remember, Leviticus 5 is the trespass offerings. Let's see, where was it? If verse 2 of chapter 5, Leviticus, or if a soul touch any unclean thing, whether it be a carcass of an unclean beast or a carcass of an unclean cattle, he shall be guilty. He also shall be unclean and guilty. Also, if he toucheth the uncleanliness of man, whoever touch. So you could become unclean by touching the carcass of one of these animals, and you could also become unclean if you touched a person that had just touched the carcass. And all night long, remember, until the evening, you were unclean. You had to clean yourselves, and you had to, like this says later on, we have to break pots and everything. Whatever it touched, you have to break. So verses 1 through 8, of course, that was the clean and unclean meat. So verses 9 through 12, we're going to read about the water creatures. So these shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall you eat. So you got to have fins and scales. So keep that in mind. Fins and scales, and all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all that move in the waters, and of any kind of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. So think of crab, lobsters. They move in the waters. They do not have fins and they do not have scales. Shrimp don't have fins, don't have scales. A lot of people eat different kinds of, like, I've heard of people eating eels and urchins. Plenty of things. People eat plenty of things, but if they didn't have fins and scales, they were unclean. They were an abomination. They shall be even an abomination unto you. You shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. So remember, you're gonna consider these creatures, especially their dead bodies, abominations, and that's a big word. Like, you got to wonder, these are animals, and God is calling these abominations. These are animals that a lot of people like to think, everything under God's green, on God's green earth is good and so forth. But a lot of these animals were abominations. So you got to wonder where these creatures, how they became abominable. Where down the line did these creatures come from? And they became abominable. And remember, if you go all the way back to Genesis, the account of Noah's flood, Genesis 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, whichever one it was 6, I think. 6, maybe 7, but I think it was chapter 6, Genesis, when it talks about how he was supposed to take 2 of every unclean animal and 7 of every clean animal. So keep that in mind, is he took 7 clean animals, but 2 of each unclean animal. And he's telling you, so they didn't take just 2 of each animal. They took 7 of the clean ones. And remember afterwards, and I think that's in Genesis 8, is he makes, right as soon as the boat comes to a stop and they're on dry ground again, Noah gets out and makes some sacrifices, and he starts sacrificing some of the clean animals, because only the clean animals were worth sacrificing to the Lord. So even though God was saving them, the Lord was, obviously keeping these abominations around. Even though they are abominations, he's still keeping them around. And then, of course, we find out later on that we can eat any animal. And that's in the book of Romans. And he has made them clean. God has said, you do not call unclean what I have made clean. So these animals, even though right now they're abominations, God has even saved the animals to turn the abominable ones. And these, what I would imagine, seem to be the norm. Perhaps the more natural ones. A lot of people want to believe in this, evolution or whatever, this evolution nonsense, this idea that I'm not even sure lightning struck the water and some nanoparticles, some proteins came together, blah, blah, blah. This idea of that is it's a bunch of nonsense, to be true, to be honest. It's a bunch of nonsense, but people that do subscribe to that belief, they want to say any animal evolved from whatever animal, and they have like cousins and so forth, and they evolved to better suit their environment or what have you. But that's not the case at all. God is saying right here, obviously some of them were clean, that he apparently must have made, and then there was other ones, unclean creatures that came into being. And we do see later on here in this one that snakes are part of the abominables, animals, abominations, and we do know that it was a snake that lied to Adam and Eve back in the garden. So something about these animals that obviously God knows, but we don't necessarily know. We can eat the animals that appear to be more herbivoric, and we're not allowed to eat some of the pigs are more omnivores. They'll eat meat themselves. But who knows? I'm not really sure. I don't know if I've read about this other places in the Bible to be sure, but God is saying that some of them were unclean and some of them were clean and some of them were abominations for whatever reason. And though later on we do find that he did cleanse a lot of these, or he cleansed them all. So, but of course we are into verse 12. Remember, verse 12 is the summary basically of verses 9 through 12. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the water, that shall be an abomination unto you. So again, you got crabs, you got lobsters, you got shrimp, you got clams and oysters. They have no fins, they have no scales. And then obviously there's plenty of other creatures that are the same way. And they are abominations. I imagine like dolphins and whales, I don't think they have scales. They have fins, but they don't have scales. So they're also abominations according to this. But moving on, verses 13 through 20, we're going to see about the unclean fowl. And these are they which ye shall have an abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination, the eagle, and the ossifrish, and the osprey, and the vulture, and the kite after his kind, every raven after his kind. and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the cuckoo, maybe that's cocoa, I don't know, and the hawk after his kind, and the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gier eagle, and the stork, the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination unto you. So basically, this is the summary of this, is that basically all the birds, the fowls that go on all four, so even though they got wings and they got their two legs, if they put their wings down to kind of use their wings to help them walk around at any given time, and there are plenty of animals, obviously all of these creatures must do that, the vulture and the swan and the stork, I can't say that I know all these animals, what they look like and how they all act, but God is saying that if they go on all four, they're an abomination. So birds were not meant. So God is really making a statement again that there are creatures that are not abominate. There are creatures that are clean and holy, and then there's creatures that are abominations. And so God is saying that they were meant to do a certain thing, and these ones are not doing that thing. So with the fish, anything that had fins and scales, that's what God had made for us. And these other ones were some sort of abominations unto the people. They're not allowed to touch them. They're not allowed to eat them. Don't touch their dead bodies. They're abominations to you. And so it's like fish should be one way. There's certain, fish are certain creatures that you can eat. Same thing with these, like I said, with the verses 1-8, with the bigger creatures. You got to have chew the cud, and you got to divide the hoof. You got to be cloven footed. Anything else is an abomination. And here the birds, they're not supposed to be creeping on all four. So these bigger animals that we eat, they're not supposed to, they're supposed to be eating the cud. They're supposed to have split hoofs. So you got to wonder, why are some of these creatures not doing something, or they're being pointed out for a specific act that they do, or something. These ones go on all four. The other ones cloven foot, chew the cud, and of course fins and scales. So they're supposed to be a certain way. God is saying they were created a certain way, and if they're not that way to these people, they are unclean. So that's verses 13-20. Now verses 21-23, we're going to read about the flying creepy things. Yet these may ye eat of every flying creeping thing that goeth upon all four, which have legs above their feet to leap withal within the earth. So a lot of people think that these creatures have like 8 legs or 6 legs or whatever. But if you look at the kinds of pictures, you'll notice that these legs are basically only 4 types. And they're usually, you got 2 of these, sometimes they got 2. Like you might have 2 front legs but 4 back legs. And those 4 back legs are still considered just 2 legs, because they're basically 2 of the same legs. And that's why it's saying all 4, that which they have legs above their feet to jump. So these are the locust after their kind, and the bald locust, and the beetle, and the grasshopper. So grasshoppers are a good example. They have like 4 legs that you normally see, and then they got 2 more legs, which make them jump. And so these beetles are pretty much the same way. The locusts are the same way. So a lot of people just say they have 6 legs or 8, whatever that may be. But this is saying they have 4 with, a couple of legs to leap. So let's see. But all other flying, so you could remember the locust, the bald locust, the beetle, and the grasshopper. But all other flying creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. So again, there's other creatures but they need to be leaping. These are those kinds of creatures that they leap, they jump. You can eat those jumping. Like I said, the locusts and the grasshoppers are known ones that you see them and they'll jump. And God is saying that those were clean, you could eat them. But all other flying, creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. So verses 24-28, we're going to read about people becoming unclean. And for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth the carcass of them shall be unclean until the even. Let's see. So if you touch the carcass, you're going to be unclean until evening time, till nighttime. And whosoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean. So if you touch a dead body of these creatures, the unclean, no matter which ones it be, you got to wash your clothes and you're going to be unclean until the evening. So if you touch it, you're going to be unclean until the evening. Wash your clothes, you're going to be still unclean. Even though you wash your clothes, you're still unclean until the evening. The carcass of every beast which divideth the hoof and is not cloven-footed, nor cheweth the cud, are unclean unto you. Everyone that toucheth them shall be unclean. So again, if you touch any of these, if you touch the one, if you touch a pig that is dead, you're unclean. And whatsoever goeth upon his paws among all beasts that go on all four, those are unclean unto you. Whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean. So this is any dead animal, basically, that you don't eat. So you're talking about the lions, you're talking about dogs, you're talking about bears. If their body's unclean, you can't touch the dead body. You're talking about many things, a lot of creatures that are unclean. And if you touch them, you're unclean also. And remember, and he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening, even when they are unclean to you. So that's verses 2 through 28. So when you become unclean, keep that in mind. You got to go back to Leviticus 5. They made a trespass. They have trespassed, and they must now do the trespass offering of Leviticus 5, all because they touched a dead pig, for example. A pig ran up on them or died in their backyard, and they had to go pick it up. They became unclean. They had to go offer an entire sacrifice, an entire trespass offering. So that's exactly what they had to do. Keep that, that's interesting. These are the things that they had to do. Whereas people here in America, you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to speed down the street, for example. They always want to get you for that. They want to get you for, driving, speeding tickets. They want to get you for possession of, kinds of different substances. They want to get you all kinds of things, all kinds of different crimes that we consider crimes in our day and age. But God considered this a crime. You touch a dead animal that's unclean, you're unclean. You got to offer a sacrifice. You're guilty. So moving on, 29 through 43 are the creeping things. And so these also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth. So the weasel and the mouse and the tortoise after his kind. So these are other creatures that, they're the smaller animals that, like you said, the weasel, the mouse, turtles, and the ferret and the chameleon and the lizard and the snail and the mole. So these are more creatures that they don't chew the cud. They don't have the divided hoof. They're just creeping things that creep along the ground, and they're all unclean. These are unclean to you, that all among all that creep. Whosoever doth touch them when they be dead shall be unclean until even. So again, same warning. If you touch any of these dead animals, you're unclean. And you have to remember, you have to wash yourself. You have to offer a trespass offering. And upon whatsoever any of them, when they are dead, doth fall, it shall be unclean. Whether it be any vessel of wood, or raiment, or skin, or sack, whatsoever vessel it be, wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the even. So it shall be cleansed. So now if these dead animals touch anything, so now say for example, if they touch a vessel of wood or rain, so say you see a dead creature and it's on your property, and you go get a piece of wood, like a wooden shovel, for example, or even like a wooden bucket, or a wooden, or a clay pot. They would have had maybe a clay pot, and, instead of, say, like a trash bag, they'd get like a wooden stick or a wooden kind of shovel. Maybe you'd pick up this unclean animal, put it in the vessel, maybe it's a wood box, or maybe you're putting it in a clay pot or whatever, or maybe you're putting it in clothing. Maybe you're wrapping it in, they wrapped it in a sheet, a cloth, or a skin, maybe the leather sack or anything. Whatever it touches, anything, any vessel, whether it must be put into water, and it shall be. So you got to clean it. You got to also put it in the water and clean it. And every earthen vessel Oh, look at this is the clay pots right here. So if it was like leather or cloth or maybe a wood vessel, a wood box, then you just had to clean it and it'd be clean. But if it was clay pot, an earthen vessel, ye shall break it. You have to break it. So if you put it in like a clay jar, you had to break it afterwards. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on which such water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean. Wow, what is that? Of all meat which may be eaten. So now you can eat this. So the meat that you can eat. So now you got your cows, right? Your goats, your lambs, whatever. The ones that you can eat. That on which water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every vessel shall be unclean. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not following it entirely. So basically, even though you can eat that food, if it's an animal and of meat, it's got to be meat. If there's meat that you can eat, but water gets onto it, then obviously that water so if you put meat that you can eat and you put it in a vessel and you put water in it, it says that meat will become unclean, and all drink that may drink in every such vessel shall be unclean. So if you've got a pot that you're putting meat into and you're putting water into it, you can't later use that pot to drink water out of, or to get something to drink out of that. So you can't use a meat pot to, say for example, later on put milk in it. So that's kind of interesting, and that's even the meat that can be eaten. If water comes onto it, it becomes unclean. So that's also, and then any pot or any vessel that it's in, and you can't drink out of it anymore. It's unclean. Kind of strange, but I kind of understand it. Again, you keep the idea of like food going rotten, food going bad, or the meat going bad, or perhaps blood being on it at the time and mixing in with drinks that you shouldn't do in the future. So that's interesting, but that's what it says. And moving on, verse 35, and everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven or ranges for pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. So again, anything that the carcass falls upon is unclean. You got to break the pots. You got to wash them if there's something you can wash. If they're earthen vessels, they got to be broken. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which toucheth their carcass shall be unclean. So now this is talking about like a well. If you got a fountain or a pit, so like a well, so if you got plenty of water in there, that water's clean. But if suddenly that water touches the carcass of one of these unclean animals, the whole thing is unclean. So that's another rule it's telling you. And if any part of their carcass fall upon any sowing seed which is sown, it shall be clean. So if you got a farm and you got a dead animal, that one of those dead unclean animals falls on the seed, it's still clean. But if any water be put upon the seed, and any part of their carcass fall thereon, it shall be unclean to you. So this is like if you put it on seed that you haven't started watering the seed. So maybe you plant your seeds, it's like the day, maybe you're out there sowing your seeds, but you're still, maybe in the middle of sowing it, or you just finished sowing it, but you haven't done anything. And then you turn around and look, there's a dead animal there for whatever reason. It's still, that sowing seed is still clean. But if say you sowed your seed and now you're a couple of months into it and you've started pouring water all over your farm, well, you started pouring water on that seed. You started, trying to sow it. then that carcass falls on, then it's unclean to you. So now you got a rabbit coming to your farm. You've already started watering your farm. Well, that rabbit dies. It's unclean to you. The whole that seed right there is unclean. That portion of the seed. But if you hadn't thrown water on it yet, and that it comes in, it's still clean. And then if any beast of which ye may eat die, he that touches the carcass shall be unclean until the evening. So again, even if you touch the dead body of a creature that you can eat, so now you come, there's a cow, you can eat the cow, but he dies, and then you touch the carcass of it, then there it is, you're unclean until the evening. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. And he also that beareth the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. So even touching the carcasses of the clean animals still made them unclean. So touching pretty much any dead body would make you unclean. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. So right here, moving in, still these are the creeping things, right? So all the creeping, if they creep on the earth, so this would be like the snake, whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goeth upon all four, or whatsoever hath more feet among all creeping things that creep up, them shall ye not eat. So basically all there's a lot of creatures here. Anything that they go on all four, they walk on their belly, all kinds. You can list all kinds of animals right here. Thinking about going to zoo, you could call this what? The snakes are on the belly. Anything that goeth upon all four, that'd be, like I said, the dogs, elephants. The bears. These are all, those are all creatures that walk on all four. Rhinoceroses. Just random animals I'm listing. Or whatsoever hath more feet, and then all feet, centipedes, millipedes, creatures that have a bunch of legs. There's a few creatures out there that have a bunch of legs like that. You're not supposed to eat of them. They're all abominations. So ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. So he's saying there, do not make yourselves unclean. There are clean animals and there are unclean animals, and you're not supposed to be defiled by them. You're supposed to remain clean. So this is their goal. This is their objective. This is the law that the Lord is giving them. And so moving on, the last few verses, 44 through 47, people are to sanctify themselves. So, for I am the Lord your God, ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and ye shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourselves with any matter of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So all these creeping things, there's all kinds of animals. We know there's all kinds of animals. And God is saying, do not touch their dead bodies. Do not defile yourselves with them. So death is something serious too. So that's another thing. Death is serious. The God does not touch death. He's holy. You shouldn't touch them either. You shouldn't touch these dead bodies. Even the dead bodies of the clean animals, you become unclean. And he's saying, for I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beasts and of the fowls and of every living creature that moveth in the waters and every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. So yeah, this is the whole thing about cleanliness, especially with animals, when it comes to animals. Which ones they can eat, which ones they can't eat, and when they do touch their dead bodies, how they become unclean and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. This was kind of a longer chapter than some of these previous chapters. And yeah, keep that in mind. It is about cleanliness. The next few chapters are going to be about cleanliness and different types of cleanliness. And that will go until about chapter 15. Afterwards, we'll move into kind of a different type of section. But yes, this is cleanliness, and keep in mind if they became unclean, and think of how easy it is to become unclean. It's not very difficult. You just had to touch a dead creature, and you became unclean. And there's plenty of dead creatures to go around. Even in America today, I could drive up the streets, and I will find, sometimes plenty of dead creatures that have been hit, and hitting the roads and squished by vehicles, and uh, their dead bodies are just littered around the road, and we have animal controls that could come and pick it up and everything. But that kind of a job, I mean, that's a job that we still have today. It's still an important role that needs to be filled. I mean, there are dead animals on the road. A lot of people call it like roadkill or something along those lines. There's a lot of roadkills out there, and somebody's got to clean it, or else you're just going to be driving by and everybody's going to smell the smell of death. It's going to be real unhygienic, real unsafe. Dead bodies smell very horrible. They begin to decompose. You can get diseases from touching them. You become unclean. As far as God is concerned, these people became unclean by touching these dead creatures. And if you became unclean, you had to go and do the trespass offering to be forgiven. So, but like I said, this is the end of this chapter. I'll go ahead and end it right now, and I'll end it how I normally do. If you like what I'm doing, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study, and I just pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. So, yeah, I'll just say that. Amen.